Yeah. Well, what good does that do? Sure, we should do that, but that in and of itself is not some kind of answer to the problem. Here's an idea: we should provide humanitarian aid to persecuted minorities and kill the people who are persecuting them. Now, there's something that might provide some solutions to a problem. Just providing humanitarian aid, that's not going to stop them from being persecuted. But I do agree we should arm and support the Kurds and deploy special forces units that can keep an eye on developments and project American power. Lopez also points out that Syria is broken in much the same way as Iraq, and that efforts to arm the anti-Assad rebels were doomed from the start. Virtually all of the groups that received arms and training from U.S. assets in Jordan were linked in some way to radical Islamic groups and have taken those arms and training to bolster the ISIS army. There again, confirmation that what many of us have been saying, hey, dummy, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, the rest of you brain-dead morons who call yourselves leaders, arm the rebels. The rebels are terrorists, stupid. If we were going to intervene in Syria, we should have intervened on behalf of Assad. I think we've learned with Gaddafi and Mubarak. I think we've learned. Well, actually, we haven't. Some of us have learned that, a ruthless dictator who uses his resources to keep the jihadis in check, well, that's better than letting the jihadis have it. I'm just saying. I'm not a rocket surgeon or a brain scientist by any means. But 2 plus 2 is 4. Unless you're talking about Common Core math, well, that's a whole different topic of discussion. I'm just saying. When I was in school, 2 plus 2 equaled 4. The problem we have today is in the real world, 2 plus 2 still equals 4. But these moronic idiots, and I'm talking about people on both sides of the aisle. Come on. I'm proud to be a Republican. Well, I was. I'm still proud to be a conservative. But if John McCain, if the moron John McCain were president, he'd have been, he'd have really been arming up the terrorists in Syria. Lopez is also convinced that Obama intends to work with Iran and is actively handing over power and control in the region to them. She believes Iran already has nuclear weapons capabilities and will soon be able to reach the U.S. with a nuclear-tipped ICBM. Well, of course, why wouldn't Obama be working with him? He's a terrorist sympathizer. Furthermore, she points out that the acquiescence to the wishes of radical Islamic ideology isn't necessarily coming just from the players in the Middle East, but from inside the United States government. She notes the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated all major departments and agencies, not just under Obama, but dating back over the past few administrations. which makes sense. Excuse me. Which makes sense when, you know, we threw Mubarak under the bus in Egypt, and 3 days later, the Muslim Brotherhood was in charge of the country in free and open elections. Oh, okay. In the very next paragraph, she says, and this is partially why the Obama administration was so supportive of the Muslim Brotherhood's short lived rise to power in Egypt and their overall support for the Arab Spring that stretched across North Africa and the Middle East. She sees the Muslim Brotherhood as a great threat to the U.S., saying the Muslim Brotherhood is the vanguard of Islam and Islamic Jihad. Forces of Islam historically have conquered every single major civilization that they've ever taken on, except for two: Western civilizations, or whatever's left of it, and the Han Chinese. The Muslims have defeated the Buddhists, the Byzantines, Christianity in the Middle East, Jews in the Middle East, Hindus in the Persians. This includes huge, sophisticated civilizations. Lopez thinks the Reagan-esque peace through strength is the best military policy, but warns against focusing solely on containing the threat of jihadists in the Middle East, since they are already here in America. They're already inside the wire, she said. They're already deeply embedded inside our own national security infrastructure. It's no longer a question of manning the barricades and pointing outward. They're inside. This is a CIA operative talking like this, ladies and gentlemen, not me, even though I've talked just like it on this show. This is scary stuff, and unfortunately seems true. Seems too true based on what we have witnessed over the past 6 years regarding Obama's policies in the Middle East. Maybe now we know why there was no president or vice president or secretary of defense. I can't believe, it doesn't surprise me a bit from Obama, but the vice president, the secretary of defense? Who'd they send? The White House cook? They didn't even send him. Bizarre. Truly is bizarre, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a sad day. Sad state of affairs. It makes one question, ask the question, are we already beat? Maybe we're already beat. Maybe it's over with and we just don't know it. I hope not. Hope that's not the case. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's very sad, but that's actually a scary story, ladies and gentlemen. For a ex-retired CIA operative to give such an analysis is deeply, deeply troubling. It's one thing when a moron like me gets on and tells you what I think is happening. And it scares the crap out of me that somebody in the CIA pretty much says what I've been saying for quite some time. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn because, that actually scares me. Because, I've been hoping that I was wrong. Hey, that looks like a 2, and that looks like a 2, and if we add them 2 together, I think we're going to see 4 eventually, But I could be wrong. Kind of hoping I was. Just saying. Kind of scary. Let's see here. Moving on. You know, this stuff. How much of this stuff can add up? How much of this stuff can we see before something bad happens? How many of these stories, how many of these reports, people, not just, people like me, people who've been in, and we're seeing it more and more. We're seeing more and more intelligence people, more and more military people, more and more people who are in the system doing the work, beginning to raise the red flags. Whoa, look out. Heads up. Scary. Scary stuff.